Good morning. Welcome again to our Monday morning high five. Myself, Richard Darnell. Um, we are looking at the book of Judges. We're in chapter 2. We're going to finish chapter 2 today, verses 11 through 23. Um, I'll give you kind of the summary of it. Uh, there's two headers in my Bible. It says Israel's unfaithfulness and the Lord raises up judges. That's I could really leave it right there. That's pretty much what happens, and it happens again and again and again and again in this period of the judges. This is really a period of history for Israel, the judges period. And during the judges period, one of the things that we see is that the people fall in love with these other gods, none of which have done anything for any of them, but they just for whatever reason want to serve these other gods because they want to be like the people that they have defeated, which that's a whole other level. Whole They want to be like the people that they defeated. Um, and so they get in trouble with God because they are serving these guys, little g guys. The God told them, "You don't ever serve them. Leave those gods alone." They do it anyway. God gets angry, and so God allows their enemies to put them in distress. And but at the same time, God also raises up judges. Judges were typically um, either men or women who he would use to give them victory against these particular enemies. And after, so as long as the judge was alive, they would be okay. They would listen. They would follow God. Soon as the judge passed away, they were back to worshiping. As soon as the judge took care of the problem, then they, oh, let me go back to my old ways. Let me go back to, you know, um, yeah. And then and so God just says, okay, because they continue to do this, he just said, I'm not going to completely take care of this problem. Because I already see what you are going to do. I see your pattern. Then I'm not gonna take care of this problem for you. I'm not gonna just, drive them out. I told you it was on you to drive them out. So I'm not gonna drive them out. You didn't want them gone. I'm not gonna take them out. So that's kind of the short version of the remainder of chapter 2. Um, Rich, you want to?
Yeah. Um, what I what kind of caught my attention in here was verse 12, and it's towards the end of verse 12. It says, "And they provoked the Lord to anger." And I started to think about that word provoke and what that means, and just kind of what it's saying there. And provoke means to stimulate or give rise to, like a reaction or an emotion, to deliberately make someone annoyed or angry. So this is not something where Israel one time started serving another god and God just got angry, but they provoked his anger. This is a constant, repeated offense that they kept doing. And we talk about God's love, we talk about His grace, we talk about His mercy. Um, but God has another side. God has balance to Him also, and God has anger that can be provoked out of Him, that can be brought out. It's not something He wants to use, or not. He doesn't want to show His anger towards us, but He has it, and if we provoke it, it will come out. If we constantly push that anger button on God, then God is going to get angry. Like
Absolutely.
we can we see examples of that can happen. that we can actually do that. We can push God's buttons to anger, to cause Him to take a cause on us. Um,
Yeah.
and that just it just stood out to me, like how we can provoke God, and I just kind of think about like just practical example, somebody like constantly like touching you and you're telling them not to touch you. You're like, hey, stop touching me, and they're just constantly touching, like, what are you going to do about it? And they just keep touching you, and after a while, like, they're provoking you into anger. So if you get mad and do something, it's like they can't say, "I didn't know you were gonna do that," or "Where did that come from? You never gave me a warning." Like, no, you've been telling them repeatedly, like, "Don't do that. Stop touching me, or else this is gonna happen." But they constantly are doing like pushing those buttons, and this is what we see an example of Israel doing with God, and so that just kind of stood out to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh,
Did you
Darnell?
want me? Yeah, for sure. Couple things that that I took away from it. I had highlighted. Um, the Lord was moved to pity by their groans because of those who oppressed them. When you look at that, to me, I think about how God allows us to be, well, He allowed Israel to be oppressed, right? And I think about Pastor said it before. I've had it in some of my notes before, but you need God the most when you're at your lowest moment, right? So I thought about that when he talked about God still pitied them, like He pitied them even though like they when they were crying out because they were oppressed, right? So even though God allowed them to be in that situation, He still came to their aid. He's still coming to their aid by sending judges, right? So He still cares. He's just a little bit perturbed perturbed with us, right? And then they did not. I also highlighted they did not cease from their own doings nor from their stubborn way. We are the reason that we're in situations in our lives. God gave us free will. He allows us to go, like to do whatever we want to do, right? So it's the choices that we make. When we make choices, when we make the wrong choices, then we suffer the consequences. Israel, we talked about it last week, and it gets redundant because this is Israel's overall story, right? We're Israel's the chosen people, but their overall story is that they do silly stuff and they keep getting like, and they're just suffering a long stead punishment for it, and they can't get out of that recurring cycle. They just mess up, and then God sends somebody and He fixes it. And then once that person dies, then they mess up again, and God sends somebody and fixes it. And it's just it's hard to grasp that concept. Well, it's not really because we do it in today society, right? We can't get out of our own way, and God has to continually send help for us, and sometimes we see the help, sometimes we don't, and then we see what the consequences of our not paying attention to who God sends us, right? So I think we have a lot of similarities with Israel. Whenever you're talking about Israel, and whenever you're talking about from 40 years and 40 years in the wilderness to all the way to now and to even further, it's just you really can learn a lot from them. And I think and Eric and I have talked about it before, like that's the main reason why the Bible stories are the way they are, is just for us to learn. And I mean, it's an obvious thing. It's for us to be able to learn from other people's mistakes. God is putting it in here so we can see it like, oh, like they did this. Let me not do that. But it's
Mm.
hilarious that we still do it anyway. But that's pretty much what I took away from it. It just kind of stuck out to me. That last verse, they didn't, right before verse 20, they didn't cease from their own doings nor from their stubborn way. They weren't supposed to worship those gods. They weren't supposed to dwell in that land. They were supposed to get in there and conquer it and take it over so that it could be theirs. But they wanted to do their own thing, and God was like, "Oh, okay, here we go again. I gotta send somebody and you know, and then do his thing." But that was pretty much what stuck out to me.
Yeah, good points, man. Even as I'm listening to both of you and I'm looking at it, I it just at the end of 15 it says they were in terrible distress. I'm just thinking, well, well, earlier in 15 it says, whenever they marched out, the hand of the Lord was against them for harm, as the Lord had warned, just like Richard was saying, and as the Lord had sworn to them, and they were in terrible distress. And like you were just saying, Darnell, what's I think the saddest part of this is that they were creating their own distress.
Right.
Like it wasn't that they had to be in distress. It wasn't that, like you were mentioning, they didn't have to get to the point. Like they kept choosing that it was these are their choices,
Right.
and God is continuing to send. Like, okay, look, I see, like you got me upset. Okay, you're running around with these other guys, even though I'm the one who brought you. You were slaves. I I upgraded you. I gave you like this land, and still you're gonna turn your back on me. Okay, like I'm hot about that, but I still care, right? I still care. I'm a send. I'm a send someone who can solve the problem you have today because I still care, because I'm still good. And yet you want to, it's like you want to be a victim. You keep choosing to be a victim. You keep choosing defeat instead of victory. Like
Right.
you're supposed to have victory because I'm your God, but you're choosing defeat because you are choosing a different God who can't give you victory, and you
Right.
give you victory.
Right.
You're not under any, you know. Never once have you prayed to these guys and they've given you victory. Never once. But you keep choosing them. And because you keep choosing them, in essence, you are choosing distress. And
Right.
I think, like you said, Darnell, like, how true is that of us? How true is it that we choose distress? Like, too often. It's like the song says, "Oh, what needless pains,
Mm-hmm.
We did.
you know,
Yeah.
what needs." I can't even think of the song right now, but like,
With needless pains we bear. Is
right,
that the one?
yeah,
Right.
that one. And it's so true. Like all because we do not carry everything to God in prayer. It's
Right.
a lot of it is just our choices. Like we just, I love how we can't get out of our own way. Like
Right.
we know what we're supposed to do, and yet it's so difficult. It's
Mhm.
so like there's certain things that we're just like, but I just want to choose that. The- They're just, oh, look at him on the shelf over there. Like, how am I gonna turn my back on him on the shelf?
Right.
It, yeah, I know it sounds funny when we're saying it, but like, if we really look at it, that's like that is so our lives sometimes that
Yeah.
we're going after things. There may not be like wooden statues, on a shelf, but we're going after people. We go after things,
Mm-hmm.
careers, and God is going. That's there's You're never gonna get victory from that. Never.
Right.
Yeah.
Like when you're in distress, that job, that girl, that boy, they can't help you. Can't
Right.
can't help you.
Right.
But hey, good luck with it.
Right. I
Good luck
was
with it.
we Eric, when you brought up that point, I don't know if y'all ever seen Surf's Up. It's a little cartoon. It's like a children's cartoon, but I remember there was a scene where this little penguin, um he would there was a lifeguard that he liked, but he was kind of young, like really really young. So what'll happen is he would go run out into the ocean and like help, 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 and then she'll go get him or whatever, and then she's doing an interview or whatever, and you can see him creeping back out to the ocean again, and then as he just turns and looks and jumps in again. So like once you said like we create our own distress, it made me think of that. Like, can you imagine us going to the pool? We can't swim, jump in the deep end. The lifeguard has to come save us, gets us out of the pool, and then as soon as we get situated, we go jump right back in the deep end. Like, that's really a representation of how we create our own distress. And
Right.
it's like just like you said, is we can't get out of our way of thinking. So we think that it's okay, but to somebody looking out like, why do you keep doing that? Why do you keep
Right.
jumping in the deep end if you know you can't swim?
Right.
And it's the same thing to Israel. Like, why do you keep doing these things when you know God told you otherwise? You can't be without Him. You need Him. He's the one that got you here. So now, why switch your thinking into thinking that these gods and these people that you're dwelling with are the ones, all right? So that it kind of I thought that was funny. It kind of made me. As soon as you said distress, it made me think of that, and I'm like, you jump continually in the pool. But yeah,
So
Yeah.
as you're talking about that and how it made you think of that, uh, it kind of the same thing. It made me think of this. It's a short video.
uh huh.
С этой стороны, против солнца.
So
I had posted that a couple weeks ago.
yeah, yeah,
I had,
and like the sheep it got out of trouble and it was out for maybe 5 6 seconds, and it was like in that position. It's in distress. It can't eat. It's 6 seconds and it's right back in. As soon as it's out of trouble, it dove right back in. Not fell, but it intentionally dove right back in. And it just made me think about that because that's how Israel was. Like they
right,
intentionally went right back in as soon as they were out of trouble.
right,
You know? Yeah.
Yeah.
absolutely. And
Like they forgot what it felt like.
Right.
Yeah.
yeah, the caption
But
that was on that video is what made it funny. Like when the 99 sheep and the one that God had to chase, that one was me. That got me. Yeah, that video had me rolling. Just to jump right back in. That's why we're
Right
compared
back.
to sheep, man. That's why we're compared to sheep because we do silly stuff like that. We get out of a
Yeah.
situation and just jump right back into it, head first, straight nose dive, right back into it.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, clearly we could keep talking about these scriptures because it really I hope those of you who are watching, I hope you can see how it's relevant. Like,
Yeah.
yes, this is a story about Israel's history, but this is also a lot of us are living this even now.
Hmm.
Right.
And it's kind of sad, like Darnell was saying, we should recognize we don't have to. We can see how it ends up, but sometimes like the things that we just think we need will continue to have us in distress.
Yeah.
And until we decide, you know what I think I need, I don't actually need. It's
Hmm.
not it's not doing anything but causing me distress. Until we reach that point, that level of maturity with our decision making, we can expect just like Israel to repeat a pattern just over and over and over again. So if God says the same, you can join us next week. We'll talk about the pattern. We'll talk about the pattern. We'll talk about the first judge. We'll get into the story of the period of the judges for Israel. Thanks for joining us. We
Yes.
appreciate you. Hope you have a great rest of your Monday. Anything else, guys?
That's it.
No.
That's it? All right. Have a great Monday.